Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Ryan and Grant for another episode of Grant Teach Me Something.
That was classy.
And we are here at Propelio Studios, courtesy of Propelio, which is a tech company for you guys that we provide you with MLS comps or access to MLS comps, off-market lead lists, lead management, and websites coming soon, and all other tools and desires.
It's the real deal, guys.
Real estate investment needs.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Kemp
Yes.
from CreativeCashFlow.com, what are we learning today?
Today we're going to talk about property valuation because it's one of the most important skills that you can have as an investor or somebody who's going to be dealing with real estate is you've got to know how to properly see what the ARV on a property is going to be. And I can tell you right now, the answer is not by going to Zillow or Trulia or something like that.
So is this like the know your numbers, or is this like know your numbers more?
So yeah, to a certain degree, because it's know your numbers. This is one of the aspects. Well, this is one of the numbers that you need to know, and this is arguably the most important number that you need to know. Is what's your property going to be worth whenever you get done fixing it?
Excellent.
Right. So there's going to be different ways that people handle this. There's going to be different ways that people go about getting their numbers and that kind of thing, but they're wrong, and I'm just kidding. But it's important to get the right number pegged out, and it is somewhat of a science. It is an artistic science that you've got. Now, it kind of depends a little bit on what your end goals are, and one of the reasons—
Make money,
Yeah, make money, right? One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because I know that, like, for instance, Daniel, when he runs his comps, he's going to be looking for what is the absolute top of the market, and I can get that at least, right? And he runs his rehabs accordingly. I do things a little bit differently. I'm a little bit more conservative with my numbers because I want to have kind of that certainty of, hey, I'm going to get X.
And I'm glad we're doing this so close to, because we did a video, I think it was when you were sick with the flu or whatever it was. We did kind of a, not property valuation, but just like a running comp situation.
Oh, okay.
And if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. We'll drop a link for that later. But the big thing is, it is an art form, and it always comes down to it depends. So everything's an opinion, and it depends on all the things, but ultimately you have to have the stuff to back it up.
Right.
But the way you run your numbers, the way Grant runs, or you are Grant, Danny runs his numbers, the way I run my numbers, everybody runs numbers differently. So I'm glad we're getting a different opinion so close to the other opinion.
Yeah, and it's also one of these things too where you've got to know, and without stepping on anybody, there are a lot of people out there that are going to capitalize on the fact that numbers can be run differently by different people. And I'm looking at you wholesalers. There's a lot of wholesalers that are like, oh yeah, this could be worth
$3 million.
$3 million, of course, you know. So it's really important that you know how these numbers work so that you can verify your numbers with what you're going to do on the property. Never trust somebody else's numbers. Any good wholesaler, on their emails is going to say run your own due diligence, that kind of thing, because that is very important. And this is how you get that done. So in the interest of trying to get these things succinct and really in front of you, I'm going to be trying to shorten these things down. We're going to shoot for that 20 to 30 minute mark. So we're going to kind of power through a lot of things moving forward on it. Speaking of which, can we get our handy dandy timer going?
Man, I'm already failing.
So let's jump in. Let's jump into how we're going to be valuing these properties. So one of the most important things is that when you're looking at your comps, and I recommend that you go in through Propelio on this because, I have access to the actual MLS. I can get into MLS and look at comps there. But whenever I'm looking for comps, I'm typically, Propelio is the fastest place, the best user experience to get those things. So I'm going through Propelio anyway. I recommend you do the same thing. When you're
we need to get a giant button here. That's
for
like
a plug,
like subtle plug alert. It's like the random alarm, like subtle plug alert. Anyway, sorry.
It is.
It's Wednesday.
But it's very important to me. I never talk about same way I never recommend anybody for a job if I don't believe they can really do it. Same thing with Propelio. It is a good product. I recommend you looking into it. Anyway, so when you look at these comps, you need to see actual sold properties. That is the only thing that matters, is the properties that have really sold.
In addition to that, we're talking about sold that are fixed up to what you're trying to fix up to, right?
Exactly. That's the next part.
Because even though there might be a sold in the area, if it's an 80s hadn't been renovated in the 80s
Right.
is probably an investment property. So that's not a comp, right?
Right, exactly. So that's exactly the next step, right? So you've got
sorry.
you've got to look at your sold properties. We don't care about pending, we don't care about active, okay? Because somebody can list a property for $260 trillion. But it doesn't matter that they listed it for that much money.
Right.
What matters is what somebody will actually pay for a property. Now, when we talk about comping a property, comp stands for comparable. So you have to make comparable houses in your neighborhood, and that's exactly the next part is what does that rehab look like on the property that you're looking at as a comp? What does a rehab look like? And this is how you understand what your rehab needs to look like, because if every comp in every comp in your neighborhood has granite and hardwoods, you better plan on putting granite and hardwoods in your house.
Now, and even with that, on hardwoods, you've got the fake hardwoods, you've got the tile hardwoods, you've got the $20 million of square hardwoods. But again, if this over here, it's always this to this to that to that.
Right.
And I don't know what's the best way to really
Comparable.
Yeah, but really make it strike home. You know, if somebody else is not being cheap, don't be cheap.
Right.
If they've got the fake wood, you can get away with fake wood.
Right.
Right.
And that's what you're looking at in your comps is you're seeing what is the value of the rehab, what is the quality of rehab that has been done to all of these properties that sold for $250,000. If every property that sold for $250,000 has nice hardwoods and has granite in the kitchen and in the bathrooms, you need to plan to do the same thing. But if all of the comps, similarly, if all the comps have carpet and Formica and no backsplash, then you're going to get away with your rehab for a little bit less. So this is why it's so important to do your due diligence, because you can't just have a sheet of paper that you hand to your contractor every time and you say, use this on every property that I do. I want you to put these into it, right? Because your neighborhoods are going to be different. Your neighborhoods are going to call for different things. And there's been times where I'll buy a house that's in a crappy neighborhood, but it's one of those that's being gentrified. And, you know, and I look at it, I'm like, gosh, man, they've got $6 a foot hardwoods in every one of my comps.
Yeah, and just to be annoying to you, the only time you can do that where you could have your three, hey, I want this, I want this, I want this, is if you're only buying in one neighborhood.
Right.
Then you could do it.
Yeah.
But then your risk is way high because you're that's not good.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can do along those lines is you can have your supplies for like, this is my low end, this is my mid range, this is my high end, right? You can kind of separate those things out. But again, it's so important that you're actually looking at the real sold data in that neighborhood, seeing what they go for. Now, when you're looking at that sold data, what can you and what can't you use as a comp? That is a very important part to think about. So let's kind of hammer out some things that you need to know on this. You can only go within 20% of the size of your house, okay? So if you have 1,000...
Is that up or down?
Yeah. So if you have 1,000 square foot home, your house that you're trying to figure out what it's going to be worth is 1,000 square feet. You can go from 900 square feet to 1,100 square feet. It's going to be a plus or minus of 10%.
I'm glad you said that.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a 20% range plus or minus 10%.
Got it.
So when you're pulling your comps up, that's what you need to look at. If you have a 1,000 square foot house and you see a 1,500 square foot house sold for $250,000, you can't use that as a comp because it's a 1,500 square, it's outside of the range. It's not comparable to your house.
But Grant, what if there's not any that are in that neighborhood?
That's when you start having to get tricky. That's when you can consider that, right? It's not a direct comp, but you can use it to give you clues as to what your property is going to be worth. Because you will run into that. You'll run into these times where you've got 1,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Every other house in the neighborhood is 1,500 square feet, 4 beds, right? That can get challenging. So let's go down that road a little bit, right? So if we've got 1,000 square foot house, our house that we're comping is 1,000, 3 and 2, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. But every other house in the neighborhood is 1,500 square feet. We are undersized. Now, the cool thing about that is that you get to use the full price per square foot of your other comps. So what you're going to do when you find your comps, ideally, is you're going to find 3 other houses that directly compare to what you would do with your property.
Just 3, but what if there's like 8?
You want to narrow it down to 3.
Okay.
If there's 8, you want to narrow it down to your 3. I take that back. Ideally, you've got 3 that are going to really be like, this is what I'm doing. If you have 8 that are like, this is what I'm doing, include those.
That's just like frosting and butter and
exactly.
cherries.
It's going to give you a better idea of what's going on, but you need a minimum of 3.
Got it.
And usually, just from my experience, usually you're not going to have a whole lot more than 3 that are direct comps, because what you're going to do if you have 8 is you're going to start narrowing it down, and you're going to be like, well, these 4 are actually pretty, they're 1,115 square feet, so I'm gonna knock those 4 off so that I can really narrow down to what mine is, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to find your 3 that are direct comparables. And what you're going to do is you are going to use their price per square foot. Now, this is another one of those real, like in MLS, I have to select the 3 that I want to use, and I have to say run CMA, and I have to look at the CMA and do all the math myself. And at the end, at the bottom, it'll tell me price per square foot, that kind of thing. The cool thing with Propelio, on Propelio's comping system, is that you just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Am I going to use this as a comp, or am I not going to use this as a comp? And your thumbs up ones, it will do all the math for you, and it gives you a really big number that's like, hey, do you want to use the price per square foot? Do you want to use the average price? Blah, 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 blah. I recommend you use your price per square foot, and it'll tell you what your number is for your house right there. Really plain and simple. The UI is great with it. So what you're doing is you're looking at the average price per square foot of each of those homes. So the price per square foot of your, one of your comps may be $90 a square foot, and then one might be 95 and one might be 92, right? So your average price per square foot is going to be like 92 and a half or whatever.
So real quick for us math dummies, and I don't have Propelio, what do I do? What's the simple formula for that?
The simple formula is basically what did it sell for and how many square feet is the house, right? So if it's a $100,000 house and it's a 100,000 square foot house, it would be $1 per square foot. For every square foot of that house, you get...
Grant's like, you want me to do math? I'll show you math. I'll do the easiest math problem ever. $1.
Hey, it's because I knew that I would just embarrass myself if I tried to do anything more important. You're sitting there telling, like, well, what's the formula? I'm like, oh, crap, I don't know how to do math. Well, I'll just make it 1-to-1. So, yeah, so you're looking at your square footage, and for every square foot that you have in this house, what is the price that you get for it, right? So the easiest example, 100,000 square foot house, $100,000, that's $1 per square foot. That's how that works. And that's how we're gonna value everything, is we're basing everything based on the dollar per square foot.
And then if my house is 90,000 square foot, I would take that dollar from that house, apply it to my square footage, and now I have a $90,000 house.
Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out, because that's actually, that's very important to understand, because we've got
That's what I'm here for.
we have an undersized house. If every house, let's say
undersized house,
at 90,000 square feet.
house.
A 90,000 square foot. Aww. So if every comp is 100,000 square feet and our house is 90,000 square feet, we're on the low end, right? Now we're going to use that full dollar per square foot, and we're going to multiply it by our square footage, which is 90,000, which means that our ARV would be $90,000. Okay, that's how dollar per square foot works for you.
And we're still within that plus or minus 10% range.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So here's the follow-up to that, right? That's the simplest form. That's where everything is going. Here's a follow-up. What if every house in the neighborhood is 1,000 square feet and your house is 1,500? You're oversized.
Yeah. Well, before I say my answer or what Daniel's answer is, I'd like to hear what your thought process is.
So what I learned from an appraiser who, well, basically, appraiser told Scott Horn is who trained me on all of this kind of stuff. What we use is we'll use the full dollar per square foot for the first 1,000. I'm trying to remember my examples. For the first 1,000 square feet, okay? Because our average in the neighborhood, whatever the average in that neighborhood is, the average square footage, you can use the full dollar per square foot for that amount.
Right.
Okay? Past that, whatever amount you have left over, in this case we've got 500 square feet left over, right? Because the average, everybody was 1,000, we're 1,500.
Right.
For that 500 square feet, you can only use a third of the price
Only
per
a
dollar.
third? Okay.
A price per square foot. And then you add those two numbers together. So let's say that it is $100 per square foot, and we've got a 1,500 square foot house.
Right.
So for that first 1,000 square feet, we get a full $100. So let's pull out a calculator because I don't want to embarrass myself and show you how stupid I am with
Basically
math.
115-ish?
Probably.
116.7?
100
116.7.
1,000. So 100 times 1,000 is $100,000. That's for your first 1,000 square foot. Then for your next 500 square foot, you can only use $33. So that's going to be $16,500. So your total ARV.
What I said 116.7. I was pretty damn close.
That's pretty close. That's impressive.
I'm Rain Man.
Rain Man.
Rain Man, mother.
Ooh. So that's how you're going to work it. You're going to do $100 per square foot for your first 1,000 because that's what everybody else is getting, and then you can split that by a third for the next 500. That's how you deal with an oversized house. Okay. Now, when you're looking at your comps, you can only look, like we talked about, plus 10%, minus 10%. And you can only compare to other 3-bedroom houses if yours is a 3-bedroom. If yours is a 3-bedroom, you can't go out and use these other 4-bedroom comps and get their price per square foot. If yours is a single-story house, you cannot use 2-story houses.
But before we get too far, Matt, we will get to your question, but we're talking about the size above. So I know, like, if the neighborhood is 1,000 and my house is 1,500, I can't do dollar for the gain.
Right.
But what if my house is 850 and it's 150 less?
Yes.
Now, do I also have to discount, or do I just kind of push the market?
Yeah. So at that point in time, what you're going to be doing when you are undersized, and I'm getting here so I can see your guys' questions. When you are undersized, I got it. Oh, look at that. You can still use the full price per square foot on that. And
why is that? Is that just an industry thing, or is this
just an industry thing? I mean, that's just like I said. And anytime I talk to an appraiser or something, I try to what's it called? Bend their ear, and see what they're using, that kind of stuff for their valuations.
Magnolia Market shout out.
Oh yeah, your Magnolia Market. Is your mouth nice and wet from there?
It is. It's very satisfied.
So when you made me lose my
joke here at Propelio.
Lose my track of thought.
Courtesy of Jawad and Corey.
Yeah, thank you guys. So when you're undersized, yeah. So I talk to my appraisers anytime there's an appraiser out there, and I ask them, like, what are they doing? I ask them questions about what would you do in the scenario, that kind of thing. And those undersized houses, you're looking at your price per square foot fully, and then depending on your rehab, sometimes you might be able to push it just a little bit, because here's the thing: if you've got an undersized house, and your price per square foot it puts you to a price of like $110,000. But there's not a single house that's sold in that neighborhood for under $125,000. You're probably pretty safe to get that $125,000 off of it, right? This is where that art form comes in. But you got to know you're up against it, because you have an undersized house and you're trying to sell it in a neighborhood full of bigger houses. So it's going to be a little bit harder for you.
Yeah, and not to skip ahead too much, but this comes to mind. If you're in a hot market where everything's on days on markets, 1 or 2 days, and it's sold, and the inventory in that neighborhood is like 1 or 2 houses, by all means, I'm not your agent, I'm not your broker, I'm not your attorney, but by all means push the market.
Right.
But if you're in a neighborhood where there's a shit ton of inventory, you might want to be a little bit more risk averse, and get it off your books.
Yeah. So these are all really good things to consider, because again, comping these properties, knowing your tricks of the trade and knowing how to value a property is just endlessly valuable.
What's funny is we're still talking about just property valuable. I missed your plug.
What I'm saying is very valuable.
Oh, whatever. But we're still just on the size of the house. So, and I know there's so many factors, and I don't want to spend an hour and a half on the size. So we talked about when you go over, your price needs to drop according to Scott Horn and Grant.
And appraisers. Because they're the ones that ultimately are the appraisers.
The professionals. over your like for like, you're getting at about a
Your
third.
average of the neighborhood.
Right, but you're after the mark, it's only about a third of the square
Third
foot.
of the dollar per square
But
foot.
if you're a little bit below what the market,
full dollar per square foot.
Go for it, baby.
And then try to kind of match whatever that minimum, whatever the lowest thing is that sells in the neighborhood, you should be able to push to that.
Right.
Again, only can do 3 bedrooms if you have a 3-bedroom house. Only can do 4 bedrooms if you have a 4-bedroom house. If you have a 2-story house, you need to compare to other 2 stories. Because here's an odd thing. Like there's a neighborhood down in DeSoto that I was doing, or I don't know, South Dallas that I was doing comps on the other day. Oddly enough, the 2-story houses sold for less than the 1-story houses, right? So I couldn't use the price per square foot on a 1-story house because for whatever reason, people wanted the 1-story houses in that neighborhood. I had to look for other 2-story properties and use their prices to go off of it. So you can only use, if you're single story, use single story. If you're 2-story, use 2-story. If you have a pool, you need comps that have pools. If you have no comps that have pools, depending on how nice your pool is, you're typically going to get somewhere around $7,000 on your ARV for that pool.
Yeah, and that's always like one of the biggest questions that I would say new investors or even homeowners or even professional investors, they're like, what does my pool do to my house?
Yeah,
so I think
barely anything.
That in itself is a whole other segment.
Yeah.
So
barely anything. Now, if you've got a really nice, like landscaped waterfall, that kind of thing, you might get $10,000 to $12,000 for it. If you've got a normal pool, you're looking $6,000 to $8,000 on your ARV.
But again, ultimately it depends because it depends on what market you're in. Because if you're in a market where that pool in 10 years, the foundation is going to break up the land and all you're doing is the next person's got to deal with ripping it out, well, it's probably a negative.
Well, and the fact that he says that too, when I get a pool, if it's anything but perfect, 9 times out of 10, I'm ripping the pool out and filling it in.
Yeah.
I just don't like dealing with pools, and it's going to cost you $4 or $5 grand to rip it out and fill it in, right? It could even cost $65, depending on what your costs are. But it's just better than having to deal with it because pools are one of those things that sure might be nice for some people, but people will not view your house because it has a pool.
45-second tangent. I have a rental property as a pool. What do you do?
Rip it.
Why?
Because I don't want the liability of having that pool in there. If a kid falls in and drowns, I don't want anybody to sue me for it.
And you don't want the kid to die either.
Well, no, it's more about my money. Let's be yes, no, obviously we don't want the kid to die either. But rip it, fill it in. I just don't like dealing with pools. When we're in the investment world, right, our job is to look at what is going to be the most appealing to the most people so that we can get this thing sold quickly or rented quickly, right? We need to be looking for that majority of people. So that's why we're looking at stuff like, hey, what are the comps that sell? What are they doing? We're going to copy that kind of rehab. And if all the comps that are selling are all Formica, no backsplash, carpet, just nice and neat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a nice Formica in there, and I might put, or I am going to put a backsplash on the kitchen and that kind of stuff. I'll do a couple of things to raise to where mine looks nicer than everybody else's. Right.
And this is where ultimately it's like for like as much as possible. But like someone like Daniel. Like where maybe the neighborhood has Samsung appliances, well, let's spend $1,000 more and get like KitchenAid. Just because you spend the money in the kitchens and the bathrooms.
Right. Kitchens and bathrooms are where you spend your money on. And similarly, like supplies, and this is just another small tangent. You don't have to use the most expensive supplies on things. Where you can spend money on, like a tub surround, go out, spend a little bit more on your price per square foot on the tile on your tub surround because there's not much of it there, right? The tile in your like guest bathroom, there's not much of it there. All of your cost is going to the labor anyway. So you can spend $3 a foot on your tiles on those things, and it's going to raise your overall cost of that bathroom by like $150. But it's going to look really nice, and the labor is where everything's going on there. So you do want to find places in your budget where you can get a little bit nicer, if you can, than what's in the neighborhood, and that will help you out. But ultimately, don't put $6 a foot hardwoods in a neighborhood that has carpets. If the neighborhood has all carpets, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a vinyl plank in there. That's a hardwood-looking vinyl plank. It looks really nice. Vinyl plank. It's just basically a peel and stick looking wood laminate. But it looks really nice, and I'm spending $1.50 installed.
So here's again, a show like this could be, it depends all day long. Same situation. The full neighborhood is an older neighborhood. They all have carpet, but you rip up the carpet and it's got beautiful hardwood floors.
Yeah, so
do you keep them or do you recarpet?
Yeah, no, absolutely keep it. And then, so you look at your prices too, and you see what your contractor might be able to refinish those floors for, and you see what that might get you. So there's a house in North Fort Worth that I've got that the hardwoods were in really rough shape, but they were really like in their bones, they were good. They just looked bad. They were scraped up and all that kind of stuff. Well, long story short, I was able to spend like $3,000 resurfacing the floors, and it added like 10 grand to my ARV, right? That's totally worth it. So look at things like that.
Yeah, that's why, like, again, if you're new, well, if you've been in this business, it's nothing new to you, but if you're new and you come across hardwood floors, it's like that hidden treasure. You're like, yay. I know we were probably going to get this to anyway, but Matt brought it up. What about the ideal distance from the subject property?
Yeah, that's absolutely the next thing that I want to talk about. So, Travion, if you could switch us over to the computer here, I want to show you guys something that's real. This is a neighborhood that I've comped before that I want to point out to you guys what you need to look for, because it is not about the distance from the house, it is about what neighborhood you're in. The reason I'm pointing this out is this right here, if you're just looking at this, what you've got is you've got a small little nook of houses right here with just a couple of ways to get in to the neighborhood from it, right? We've got this road getting in and this road getting in. But if you just kind of viewed this overall area, what you're basically looking at is you see a divider road going all the way through this, right? And you see one neighborhood on one side of it, and you see a lot of neighborhood on the other side of it, okay? So we need to be looking out for areas like this because, hey, if I've got a property in this house right here, I'm gonna do a Google Maps view of it.
Ooh, technology.
Ooh, look at this, we getting fancy. And this is what this neighborhood looks like.
And by
right
we,
here.
he means Google.
Google's getting fancy.
Google's fancy.
Okay, so, but if I go right on the other side of one of those arteries right here, and I click in and I'm looking at these houses, look, it's a different neighborhood. It's slightly different, but it's a different neighborhood. And look, this is the kind of house that we've got on this side of that street. If I go back on the other side of that artery, just one street over, it's similar, but it's not quite as nice. I'll tell you right now, the comps in this little area, this spot that I'm looking at right here, the comps in this little nook are like $75,000 less than this side of the street.
Now, is that all because the other side of the street had greener grass?
Yeah, it's all the landscaping.
No, I mean, serious though, but it's just like, I mean, that's obviously all we're looking at is Google Maps.
Right.
But immediately you see, and Google Maps are not current, but that being said, it's like, ooh, nice and green, and the other one's like, eh.
It does have a little bit to do with how the neighborhood's being taken care of, because one of the things I'll tell you just from my own knowledge of this neighborhood, this is in an HOA on our east side of, what is the street right here, Diamond Oaks. That is in an HOA neighborhood, right? It's an optional HOA, but it's an HOA. And this is on a golf course on this side. This other neighborhood has arteries coming to it, but the houses are a little bit older and they aren't in the HOA, and your values are affected by it. So this is one of the biggest things I want you guys to take away, and we're gonna end up on this note here because too many investors will say, well, you just get your comps within a half a mile, or well, you get your comps within a quarter mile, and that's not what you need to do. What you need to do is you need to look at your neighborhood, and you need to see, and you actually, me and Ryan actually had a lead in here that was, you remember that lead that came over here?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up.
You just realized that?
Yeah, I was like, because I think I looked at a house here, and it was a nice house, and it was on the golf course itself. On this side, I forgot what the comps were, but they weren't this.
Yeah.
It was these houses were much lower than this, but the lady had a professional in the I sell houses, real estate, realtor, broker game, and she was giving her all these comps on the western side of the golf course. So she was like, again, I don't know what the numbers are. It's been so long.
I think it was like 245 versus 300, something like that.
Yeah, there was like a $50,000 to $100,000 difference of ARVs, but it was all because of that, and that green belt, that golf course. Everything on the left was good. Everything on the right was It's still good. It's
It was
just
great.
not-
Yeah, it's just different. So this is why it's so important that you guys know your rules that we're talking about here. You've got to know your size. You want to typically be within the same decade of the house, right? If you're a 1982 build, you need from 1980 to 1989 is basically what you're looking for.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we run in here is we crossed over a decade line on this side of the neighborhood. Over on these, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like size of house and age of house too played into it. But it's very important that you use your brain when you're doing your due diligence and you're actually looking at the neighborhood itself. And that is what you want. You cannot cross a major road. So like Buckingham right here, we could not use comps from the other side of Buckingham, even if it's within a 0.15 of a mile. It's across a major road. It's a different neighborhood. You can't use those comps.
And because you're talking about major roads, what if my house, my subject, is on that really sexy street with all the green and has the high valuation?
Yeah.
But it's a corner house on that busy road.
That's a very good question. Thank you for
what
bringing
kind of
that up.
discount?
10%. You got to knock 10% off of your ARVs. So if you're looking at an internal comp, a comp from within this neighborhood, and then actually Diamond Oaks is a great example because Diamond Oaks is the main artery that comes in and out of this neighborhood. It's a larger. It's got a median, painted median. You know what I mean? So if you're on a thoroughfare, anything with a painted median or basically enough room for cars to be parked on both sides and still a full lane for both ways of traffic, you've got to knock off 10% versus if you had an internal comp. So if you have 3 internal comps, you're going to find your price per square foot, you're going to multiply that by your subject property's square footage, and then you're going to knock 10% off of that. And that trips up a lot of people as well.
So what do you think, what are some, because I know you look at a lot of properties, we look at a lot of properties. What are some of the mistakes people but people do when they're evaluating properties?
Yeah, so that's a big one, is not taking off proper amounts for being on a thoroughfare. Another one is using comps that are not comps, using a 4-bedroom, using a comp with a pool, using comps that are way outside of the size.
Power lines?
I don't run into power lines a lot, but it's kind of similar in that you're basically looking at like a 7% discount if you're one of those. What you're referring to, I think, is those houses that back up to the big metal power lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. They look like lines and they have power. So power lines?
Yeah, they're like 5 to 7, and we're not just talking about, hey, this is a normal street power line.
Right.
We're
I'm not talking about
the
utilities.
big metal.
I'm talking about the things that people. Gives me cancer. I don't know.
Yeah. You're 5 to 7% down on those, and you've typically, another thing that's more of the art form side is you gotta, with these things, not only are you discounting on your price, but you've also got to be aware it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to sell that property, and there's not really a good like classification of, hey, you're going to spend 4 more days on the market or 10% more time on the market, but. Remember when I said earlier, we want the thing that the most people want. Anytime you get out of this most people want it realm, it's going to take you longer to sell it.
So can I throw you into the fire pit?
Let's see.
Okay. So I'm going to start just thinking up random shit and giving it to Grant and see what his opinion on it. If you have other random stuff that you like to throw his way to get his opinion, please let us know.
Yeah.
Elementary school, if you're right in front of it. Right across the street from it.
I don't have a percentage on that, but typically what I do when I run into that is I'm using 7 to 10% down, unless I have comps that are in front of the elementary school that I can use as comps. You know what I mean? Similarly, like with the thoroughfare, if you've got comps on the thoroughfare, just use those comps. See what they're doing instead, and then you don't have to knock anything off because you have a comparable.
What about, like, I know...
And let me stop you real quick. Just to make sure, if you guys have questions, please put them in the comments here. We're going to be wrapping up in this next few minutes. Again, in the interest of trying to keep this succinct and happy and quick for you guys. Drop them in here because we do want to address what you guys are thinking about. So yeah, please, next.
I thought I just said that.
Well, but I said it better.
Damn. What about, I'm not an agent, you're not an agent, and because again, I'm not sure, I know you can't get into certain demographics, can't really talk about that as an agent, but what about like crime rates? Is that something that people talk about, or is that something that you could even evaluate?
I don't really factor that in, other than like there's a couple of areas that I don't like to buy in because like you're gonna get shot when you're running through there. Right? Like the way that we'll say it is staying out of the war zones. But there's a thing called redlining that we have to stay away from in the mortgage business, where you're trying not to only do, or you're trying to not keep away from business that is in certain areas because they want to have everybody rejuvenating and getting proper lending in every type of area. Because what'll happen is the extreme side of that is that can turn into racial discrimination really easily by people saying like, oh, well, I just don't buy there because of the median income or whatever. And it's knocking out a whole section of town. So to try and get away from that, they call that redlining. And as a mortgage person, you're not allowed to get into discriminating per place. So your realtors won't be able to talk about your crime rates and stuff with you, exactly like you said.
Right. What about like police stations, fire stations? Like, are those a plus? Are those a minus? Because I know certain fire stations are fairly close to residential areas.
Right, yeah, and I have not typically knocked much off for fire stations and that kind of thing, because what I find, well,
it's not a plus. I mean, hell, I mean, yes, every once in a while you'll have them, but it's like I don't think your house is ever going to burn down.
Right, yeah, and it's one of those things too that when we're comping, the reason why we're knocking these values off is because it's making it less likely for somebody to buy in that neighborhood or that house. I'm sorry. Like if they're on a major thoroughfare, it's less likely somebody's going to buy that. You have to make up for that. I have not seen pushback on fire stations, and maybe you have. If you have, let me know.
I haven't even run into it. I was just curious.
Yeah, so I haven't seen pushback on that kind of stuff.
I think it's very much like popular music these days, where they bring it down to that lowest common denominator of what people like. So like Eggshell. Somebody may really like red, somebody may really like purple, somebody may really like black. But this guy that likes red may not like purple. Purple may not like red, but they all like it. The white.
That's why you hear those wonderful terms of neutral colors, right?
Neutral colors.
And gray is our new neutral that takes in the beige, that helps. You're still modern and it's still neutral enough that people really like it. That kind of thing. We've got a couple of questions here from Dan on comping mobile homes on land and within a mobile home park and the raw land, and then also throwing out with the railroads. I'll hit the railroad one first because we actually ran into that maybe a week ago or so with a house that's on a railroad. Same kind of thing. I knock off 10% for that one. That 10% rule is one of those things that I saw enough of the appraisers were telling me like, oh yeah, it's 10%, it's 8%, it's 10%, it's 8%, whatever, for all these different things that generally, if there is an undesirable feature near it, I'm knocking off 7 to 10%, depending on how undesirable that thing is. A railroad is pretty undesirable. I'm taking 10% off. A major thoroughfare is pretty undesirable because what if they've got kids? They don't want them to be able to run out in the street. 10% off. Something like a power line, decently undesirable, but it's not like a deal breaker necessarily unless it's the cuckoo that thinks they're going to get cancer on it. 7%.
But again, this is where we throw in it depends, because if you live like in Baltimore, Boston, or New York, where
you can't get
being
away from
close to a rail line is good, well, there you go. It depends.
Now, Dan, on the mobile home things, that's not really my specialty, and I don't want to overstep my bounds. I think it's really important that we understand and focus on what we're good at. I'm really good at single family. Mobile homes, I've done one mobile home in my entire career, so I'm not the best guy to talk to. Daniel's going to be really good for mobile homes. Corey Thompson is really good for mobile homes.
Dan's good at mobile homes. I think he was just feeding you questions.
So he's just putting me on the spot just for fun. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Dan, how about you? Why
don't you answer your own question
for
the
us,
class?
and that way
Help
you
us
can
out.
get. Yeah, exactly. So it's the time that I did the mobile home. It's all the same principles, right? You're looking at comparables, and you also, like with mobile homes, you got to factor in. Is it oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it, where it's personal property, you know what I'm talking about?
Shit.
What's Dan will tell us. There's a classification of mobile homes where it's either real estate. Hey, what is it when it's not real estate and it's personal property?
Also known as chattel.
Chattel, yes. Chattel, I've always pronounced it wrong. I've always said chattel. So you need to know if it's chattel or if it's actual real estate classified, and being able to compare to others of the same. And does it come with the land or does it not come with the land? Right? Those are things that you would have to look at. Again, I'm not the expert in that. That's not my area of expertise. So you'll want to look at somebody like Daniel.
And also,
or Dan
I think that's a whole other class as well.
is.
Like comping mobile
Dan,
home parks.
the answer is send them to me. What a putz. Can I put that subtle plug button for us?
That one. Subtle plug.
That's funny.
But hey, I think we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Any other thing we could think of?
No, I think that
randoms?
this hits these main items. I really, guys, I want you to pay attention to what your comps are. And really, again, you're using those averages. You're looking for your top 3 comps. You're only within 10% plus or minus. You're only within your neighborhood. You can't cross major roads. You knock off 10% if you're on an undesirable feature.
I think, honestly, people tend to overthink this, but then they also underthink it.
Right.
And what I mean by overthink is it really is as easy as it sounds of doing like for like. If Grant's house is 1,000 square foot, is mine 1,000? Okay, cool. Yeah, we're there. And you just go back and forth, get that like for like for like. What did his sell for? Well, maybe mine will sell for the same. I think people overcomplicate when they go, well, how many bricks in the wall did his have?
Yeah.
Mine only, you know, that's getting absurd. The way people underdo it is, man, that house over there sold for 1.2 million. I can get 1.2 million.
Yeah.
That house over there is in a different city in a different part of town.
Right.
That's like 60 miles away. That's not a, anyway, I'm being absurd for absurdity's sake, but that's the point. It really is as simple as it is keeping within your little box of comps, like for like. Don't cross big roads, don't cross freeways, stay in your little lane.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. And yes, it always depends, and yes, you do have to fudge with distance, with time.
If you don't have comps.
Because we haven't even talked about the days on market, not days on market. How far back do you go? 6 months, year, 2 year? Like how far do you go?
Ideally, you want to be within 90 days. If you don't have comps in 90 days, then you go another 90 days. If you don't have comps, you go another 90 days. And then if you don't have comps, you start expanding your Your
and again, what he's alluding to is the plus or minus 10 years on the year build, plus or minus 10% on the square footage. If there's no comps, okay, maybe you add a year, maybe you add another 10 or 5%. You know, and
you're trying to get as close as possible to what you have.
And you just open that filter very gradually, very slowly.
Absolutely. So again, guys, Propelio.com. If you're watching this and you're not a member of Propelio.com, I don't know how I can help you anymore because it's such a good product. If you're not out there signed up for it, just go check it out. Go look at Propelio.com. You can do a free trial on it even. Check it out because having access to actual MLS comps is the end-all be-all to getting comps. You cannot use Propelio. You cannot use Zillow. You cannot use Trulia. Those are not accurate. They are algorithms that are not accurate. They're okay, but they're not accurate. So you've got to get real MLS sold comps. Look there, and then on top of that, you've got the CRM, you've got websites coming out, you've got the leads lists, all this kind of stuff that's really valuable for it. So before this finishes, I want you to have a tab open and go to Propelio.com and check it out. Get your free trial on it.
In addition to that, if you're from San Antonio and you came out to the event on Monday, thank you so much. If you're in Austin, Houston, we were planning on doing all 3 of those next month, but we had a very successful event in San Antonio.
It was great.
So we really don't want to. We got a little ambitious, and we're like, you know what? Let's give San Antonio another month of just all focus on that.
Yeah.
That way we don't have a shitty second event. We really want to have a good follow-up event. So thank you so much for everybody coming out. As far as if you want your flow, you want your cash to creatively flow.
CreativeCashFlow.com. That's me. So check me out at CreativeCashFlow.com. Actually, I do education. You got a 7-day free trial on that as well. You can check out what I'm doing. You've got resources, all that kind of stuff. I do a valuation video that will teach you every in and out to get the proper numbers, that kind of stuff. And I really believe on having real actionable information available for you. So you can check that out as well.
And when I was saying Austin, Houston, we are coming your way. Just we're there for Propelio right now, but as far as the events, we're going to be there soon, just not in March like we were planning. San Antonio, we will be there. Oh, we're not doing that. We canceled those because we're like, let's simmer down a minute. Yeah. So, Grant, thank you as always.
Absolutely.
We'll be there tomorrow, doing something. I don't know yet. We're still trying to recoup. Putting on those events. We packed up the studio, went down to San Antonio on Sunday night, and we came back yesterday. So, pretty excited.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Grant. We'll
right.
be back next
Thanks
Wednesday
for being here, and we'll see you next week.
And teach me something.